All right, good afternoon, everyone. We will go ahead and get started. This is Misty Woods, and I will be conducting today's call, and today is going to be the August monthly call. All right, so here's the agenda that we're going to have for today. We're going to talk briefly about the 26-27 school year administrative and procurement reviews, and then we'll briefly talk about the SSO, those of you that participated in July and into August. And then we'll go over some reminders for this coming school year, or I should say the current school year. And then we're going to go over some slides from the recent NSLP application training, some of those important slides. Then we'll go over some memos and resources, and then we'll talk about some upcoming trainings and events and finish off talking about the changes for the Division of Nutrition Support. All right, first up is the administrative reviews and the procurement reviews. So for the current school year, so for 26-27, we have currently 33 reviews scheduled. The SFAs that are scheduled to receive a review, we did send an email notification back in May, but your official announcement letters are forthcoming, so you should be receiving those in the near future. State agency staff have been conducting technical assistance visits for those SFAs that are being reviewed this school year, and LDOE is planning to conduct approximately 50% of the scheduled reviews, and the rest of the reviews will be conducted by our contractor, which is CNR. So let's talk about seamless summer option very quickly. So for those of you that participate in the Seamless Summer option, Seamless Summer actually follows the same academic school year. So it's July 1st through June 30th. So if you are a sponsor that operated Seamless Summer past June 30th, so if you operated in in July and into August, you're going to need to submit a new application for those sites that operated in these last 2 months. What you need to do, though, you need to submit that application that's open now for the NSLP application, and then the system will allow you to then submit the SSO application. We don't have that many sponsors that participated in July and August, but we do have a few. Okay, so the bulk of today's training is going to be talking about reminders for this upcoming school year, and then also about the NSLP application. So first, let's go over about the reminders. So first thing, let's talk about reimbursement rates. So the 26-27 school year reimbursement rates are out there. SFAs, the most important thing you need to pay attention to is that you're going to either use the less than 60% plus the 9 cent section, or the 60% or more plus 9 cent section for the NSLP. So that lower payment applies to those that have lunches that were served to SFAs, which they have less than 60% free and reduced. And it takes it into account by the data from the second preceding school year. The majority of our SFAs are the 60% or more, but we do have some that are 60% or less. So those are the two columns that you're going to be using for your NSLP rates. And you can see how you qualify based off of your claims data pages in the CNP system. But just please note, we have already checked into this. We are not allowed to use the maximum rate. So it's going to be those either less than 60% plus the 9 cents column, or the 60% or more plus the 9 cents column. And then for school breakfast reimbursements, you're either going to use the non-severe need or the severe need column. And again, you will see what you qualify for on your NSLP application. And just for reference, schools are eligible for severe need breakfast reimbursement rates if 40% or more of your lunches served to students at the schools, and again, from the second preceding school year, were at the free or reduced lunch. So for lunch, it's going to be 60%. For severe need breakfast is 40%. And at the bottom of the screen, you also have the after school snacks, their reimbursement rates, and I have the link to the reimbursement rates from the USDA website linked on the bottom of the slide. We do usually get a lot of questions of what is their reimbursement rate. If you're unsure, you can always contact us and we can walk you through how you can determine which reimbursement rate you should have. In addition to that, I also wanted to remind people that per 7 CFR 245-5, the LEA needs to publicly announce each school year at the beginning of the school year, and the notice must include the eligibility criteria for free and reduced price meals for those that have to do free and reduced lunch applications. We do have a notice of public release. We have a template on our CNP website. I also on this slide have the income eligibility guidelines, the link that links you to USDA website that needs to be included on that release. And then also on the slide, just for reference, I have linked the eligibility manual for school meals, and that will also take you to the USDA website. We have some questions about the free and reduced prototype application. So USDA does offer prototypes, or what we call examples, of school meal applications, as well as a sample instructional documents intended to assist SFAs in the design and distribution of their own application materials. So there is a revised English and Spanish application prototypes and instructions on USDA's website, and I have a link on the slide for that. And the application prototypes, the ones that are up on that website, meet all the legal requirements and reflect design best practices identified by USDA through focus testing and other research. They have both the paper and the web-based formats that can be adapted for household use. So if you need to go and find prototype applications, they are available on the website. They are like embedded within a memo, but you can find them on that website. Couple of reminders about CEP. So if you are a school district that elected to operate CEP for the school year, we have a CEP media release and a CEP letter to households on our CNP website. We also have the CEP claiming percentage tool that people use to help when they start doing claims. So again, on this slide, I also attached, or should I say linked, the CEP planning and implementation guidance that you can use for as a reference. So just like when you have to do your public release, you have a CEP media release if you are in CEP. State attendance factor, we've gotten some questions about this as well. So attendance factors must be determined prior to the beginning of each school year. School food authorities may use an annually determined state attendance factor, or they can calculate a custom attendance factor. The attendance factor is the number found by dividing the total average daily attendance by the total enrollment. The attendance is based on the average attendance for the entire previous year or for a particular month from the previous school year. So for 26-27, the state attendance factor is 93.21. This has been added to the CNP application, to the 2027 application. As a reminder, please make sure you are updating the attendance factor in your food service software systems. We do see sometimes when we go out that they haven't been updated. So make sure you're updating it in your software system. We do have a couple of SFAs that have requested to use a custom attendance factor. If not, if you haven't submitted that form, everybody else has to use the state attendance factor, except for RCCIs, they are actually 100%. Again, we have received the ones already. If for some reason you did not submit for a custom attendance factor, please reach out to us and we can see if we can possibly go in and change that if you would submit the form. But if you do want to do it, contact us first and then we'll give you guidance on whether you should still submit the form, but this should be done prior to us opening the application. Okay, let's talk about Buy American. I'm just going to start off by saying that we have not received any additional guidance from USDA regarding Buy American than what we've already been talking about for probably the last year now. So we just want to focus on the fact that everyone and all SFAs are tracking their non-domestic purchases. So I have a link on the slide to the Buy Americans exceptions tracker form, and it is a template. It's a USDA template. It's not, you don't have to use this optional, but you have to track in some way. Whether you use your own spreadsheet or whether you use this template, you must track. Um, So that link on that slide is going to take you to the USDA website where you can find that tracking form, which is under the resources materials. It's going to pull up to a memo about that final rule, and the resources to the left is going to have that actual tracking template. And we also have it on the CNP website as well. So the purpose of that tracker form is to track both the exceptions and the cost related to your non-domestic products. You're going to input the data related to those non-domestic products into that exceptions tracker tab, and then that exception summary tab will help you calculate its percentage of cost from your non-domestic products within the last school year. So when SFAs purchase a product that is found on that non-available, the FAR list, the non-available article list, this must be included on a tracker for the purpose of accurately tracking your non-domestic purchases. You must document the use of the exceptions to purchase non-domestic products and must be able to produce documentation as needed. And SFAs have to maintain that documentation to demonstrate that when they're using the exception of that non-domestic food purchase, that they don't exceed that annual threshold. So right now we're heavily focusing on the fact that SFAs need to be tracking, okay? In addition to that, just like last year, we have an accommodation. USDA has approved for a Buy American accommodation for the 26-27 school year. So the accommodation process provides us as a state agency the ability to approve a temporary relief for SFAs that demonstrate they cannot meet that threshold for non-domestic food purchases. So the first threshold limit for non-domestic food purchases started last school year in 25-26, and it was 10% of your total commercial food expenditures. Your non-domestic food purchases made by SFAs can't exceed this annual threshold, which is intended to shift more purchases towards your domestic products. So for 26-27, it stays the same. It will stay at 10% of your total commercial food expenditure. So make sure we are trying to stay within that 10%. However, if you are seeking that temporary accommodation from that 10% threshold, you can complete and submit that SFA accommodation plan, and you can submit it to the general email address. State agency at that point will process it. More than likely, we will approve it, but we're going to continue to provide technical assistance to those SFAs to help you to make sure that you're working towards getting to that 10%. And this is what the form looks like. It's very similar to last year. It is on the CNP website. Again, you're going to complete this if you think you're not going to make that 10% threshold. So look at what you tracked last year, see where your percentage was, determine what changes, if you had to make changes to try to decrease your percentage if you were above. And if you still think you're going to have trouble meeting that 10%, I would recommend that you submit this form, and again, submit it to the general email address, childnutritionprograms@la.gov. Okay, let's talk briefly about capital expenditures and equipment pre-approvals. So per regulations at 2 CFR 200.439, SFAs are required to obtain purchasing approval from LDOE prior to incurring the cost of equipment and other capital expenditures with a per unit acquisition cost of $10,000 or more. So at that point, if you're going to purchase something that's $10,000 or more, you're going to complete this equipment purchase or capital expenditure pre-approval request form, and you're going to submit the form along with any supporting documentation to the general email address, the Child Nutrition Programs at la.gov. But prior to submitting that form or that request, make sure that you check the state agency pre-approved list, which I do have a slide, a couple of slides later of the pre-approved equipment list. Any item on that equipment list, that pre-approved list, will receive automatic approval from us. Therefore, you don't need to submit a pre-approval request. Just one very important thing when it comes to these, those equipment must be properly procured according to federal regulations and your procurement plan. So just because you receive approval for you to purchase it, you have to make sure that you are procuring it properly. One thing that is new this year when it comes to pre-approval for capital expenditures is per USDA's indirect cost guidance, rent is often aligned with capital infrastructure costs, which must be borne by the school district's general fund. So, state agency is requiring any building rental expenses to be submitted on this form, on that pre-approval, that equipment purchase capital expenditure pre-approval form, and that takes effect this school year. So, effective 26-27, all building rental expenses must be pre-approved and assessed for allowability by the state agency before they can be incurred by the nonprofit school food service account. We do see this a lot in charter schools. So, but if you are charter, public, private, parochial, if you're having rental or building rental expenses, make sure you are submitting this form for approval. This is what the actual form looks like. If for those of you that have been submitting these in the past, it does look a little bit different. It has been updated to our previous form. It is currently on the CNP website. And again, please complete the form and submit any supporting documentation with that form to the general email address. And as I mentioned previously, this is what the Louisiana's state agency pre-approved equipment list. You'll notice that it's a lot of your normal equipment, ovens, steamers, cooking equipment, things like that. Reach-in coolers and freezers. However, the big things that people tend to forget is walk-in coolers and freezers are not on the pre-approved list. Any type of transport vehicles that is not on the pre-approval list. So those are most of the things that we get pre-approved requests for. But again, just always look at this pre-approved list to see if you already received automatic approval. Okay, let's talk briefly about non-competitive procurement. We have been getting several requests sent in, but I just want to kind of briefly go over about of it. So 2 CFR 200-320C states that for non-competitive procurement, it states that a micro purchases are a form of non-competitive procurement. It refers to sole source procurement that often falls between the micro purchase and the small purchase threshold, such as software updates, renewals, or maintenance fees that fall under that sole source umbrella. The original software company is usually the only vendor who can update or maintain or renew the software. So then you have number 3 refers to emergency situations. And it's like if an SFA has an emergency, they can call the state agency to let them know that they potentially will have a non-competitive procurement or will need approval, but you still have to request it from us, and then we will inform you of your next steps. And even though the situation may be an emergency, that form still needs to be that non-competitive procurement request form still needs to be completed and submitted. Number 4 refers to if the SFA is wanting to work with a specific vendor to kind of and forego that competitive procurement. And state agency approval is required in that situation every single time. That non-competitive procurement request form must be submitted with sufficient justification. But be aware that these requests will not be approved if the SFA's only justification is that they don't want to go through the competitive procurement process. The justification really has to be overwhelming for this type of procurement request in order for us to approve that. And then number 5, which is kind of common, just as well, sole source is pretty common when it comes to software, but the last one for inadequate competition, it refers to a situation where you have requested quotes and no vendor met all the specifications required, or you only had one vendor that met the specifications. So in this case, you proving to us that you have solicited several sources and the competition was inadequate. So you would then submit a non-competitive procurement request form to procure those necessary items. We are seeing a lot of single vendors responding, and in that case, you would just submit for inadequate competition. So just be sure that you're understanding those non-competitive procurement policies. The request form, the non-competitive request form can be found on the CNP website, and you follow the instructions on the form and then submit the form along with all the documentations. And again, you also submit this to the main email address. And I do have on the next slide is the actual what the form looks like. So when you submit these forms, you have to complete the form and submit prior to executing that non-competitive procurement. Prior approval is required to comply with state and federal regulations to utilize your funding, your nonprofit school food service account, to pay for that said procurement that you're requesting non-competitive procurement for. Again, email it and sign it and email it and send it to the general email address, and make sure you attach that supporting documentation. If you have questions though about this, please call or email us to reach out to make sure. There's occasions where you may not have to submit, and there are occasions where you will need to submit, and we will need additional supporting documentation in order to process. Here's another form that I just want to remind everybody about, especially coming into a new school year, if there's any staff changes. This is the updated agreement amendment form. It used to be called, I think, CNP information sheet online. It's actually called the CNP agreement amendment form. This is the form that you complete when there's a change, whether it's a change in the superintendent, if there's a change in the authorized representative, of a change of an address, email address, phone number, et cetera, because this is how we update our contacts in our system. One other change to note is on the old form, it said you needed to mail the original form. You no longer need to mail. You can just email this form back to the main email address. So again, if you know of staff changes, especially if you are a new director, you want to make sure that you are the authorized representative for your school district. Okay, so let's go over a few of the important slides about the NSLP application training that we had last week. So for those of you that were unable to attend the training or have not heard, the 26-27 application is now open. All forms can be assessed on the CNP website. Hard deadline here. The deadline for submitting the application is August 31st. So you have until the end of this month to submit your application. You must complete this annual renewal application by the deadline, because if you don't, you run the risk of not being able to claim meals for the month of August. We do have a lot of people that are waiting on their income and expense report to be completed because their books are not closed. We do understand that. What we would want you to do is submit that income, and we'll talk more in detail when we get there, but we want you to submit that income and expense report, even if it's partially correct, to where you have and put a comment on there stating still waiting for books to be closed, so that we can begin to process that application. Okay, so the online forms that are required that need to be completed are listed here. Information on some of the forms within the application will populate into other forms on the application. So it's important that you complete them in the following order. So you're going to start off with requirements, then you're going to move on to the policy checklist, then you're going to do Schedule A, then collection procedures, then collection officials, and then finally your income and expense. If you notice on the screenshot here, there's a section for waivers and a section for menu certification. You do not complete either of those sections. Waivers, we have no waivers for you to select or opt into. And then for menu certification, that is only going to be for brand new SFAs that are just coming on to the program. So again, the ones that are listed on the screen are the ones that are the sections that you need to complete and submit. So for the requirement sections, there's 4 sections. And they have to be completed either by the head of the organization or the authorized representative of your organizations before you can start entering data into that Schedule A. So you're going to have a CNP permanent agreement, the program year agreement, your SAM.gov verification, and the CN data sharing agreement. And then for policy checklist is basically a list of all essential policies and current year prototype forms. So for continuing school food authorities, it will be used to renew your agreement with the state of Louisiana for participating in school food services programs. So there's a few questions that it asks you. The first question is is the program pricing or non-pricing. Then it asks you a question about the public release. It asks you questions about the income eligibility guidelines for free and reduced meals, and then free and reduced price meal documents, the menu options, and then your audit requirements. And then the Schedule A, which is really the bulk of the application, it consists of 5 different parts. It starts off with the sponsor meal info section, then you have a documents and certification sections, a site participation list, the site meal info, and then the severe need eligibility. So the first part of Schedule A is that sponsor meal info section, and it contains several sections within that. So you have the student breakfast and lunch charges, you have the after school snack charges, other meal charges, your adult meal and at cost minimum, which we'll talk about in a minute, food service management companies, you have a section that only RCCIs, your software use, paid lunch equity, and then CEP participation. So we're probably going to get a lot of questions on this as you start navigating through the application. The first thing I want to state is there is no calculations that you are required to do. There is no average meal cost that you need to report to us. So you're going to notice on the CNP application this year that we've added a section below the other meal charges for what we're calling the adult price or your at cost minimum. And we've done a lot of research on this and talking to other state agencies and talking to USDA. And per USDA's guidance from FNS instructions 782-5, at a minimum, adult meal prices should be the following. So for breakfast, it's the current free reimbursement rate. And then for lunch is the current free reimbursement rate plus that menu certification performance reimbursement rate plus the current USDA food value per meal. Okay. Again, there's no calculations that's required by the SFA. The calculation is already completed for you. So you'll see that for breakfast, the minimum for your at cost should be $2.54, and your minimum for lunch should be $5.19. So we know a lot of SFAs will charge discounted price, especially for their employees. Just as a reminder, if you charge that discounted price for non-program adult meals, general fund has to cover the difference in that cost. So while general fund may absorb the overall program deficit, these funds need to make sure they're identified as repayment for non-program adult meals. So again, a lot of people were thinking back old school average meal cost. That is, we do not have to require SFAs to submit their average meal cost to us. We just have to ensure that they are pricing adult meals properly. Moving on for Schedule A, under the documents and certification, that section includes your SAM.gov registration, so where you have to upload your SAM's documentation, unpaid meal charge policy and document, procurement code of conduct certification, the procurement procedures certification, your higher threshold for certification and document, wellness policy certification, and your HACCP certification. So you're basically certifying that you have those documents. And then under your site participation list on the Schedule A, it lists all the sites within your SFA. So all current active sites will have a green check mark. Any inactive sites will have a red X. At the bottom of the list, there's going to be a total number of active, inactive. So you want to make sure that those numbers are correct. The list will also include the site codes, the kitchen manager, the operating days, the meal served, meal service information, all that was entered into each meal info site. So make sure on that site participation list that you have the correct number and the correct schools operating. Here's one that we kind of want to make sure that all SFAs are aware of. So under that site meal info, the operating at multiple locations. So the first thing is, does the site operate at more than one location? So this is when you have one site name and site code, but you have more than one physical locations. We've had this issue arise when we're conducting administrative reviews where a certain site was selected for a review, and when the reviewer came on site, there was actually another physical site location that we were not aware of. So in this scenario, the SFA will need to enter in that additional location information, which will include the school name, the address, the parish, and the grades. And please note that in the past, we knew that there was an issue that whenever you created a revision, that it would make you go and answer this question every time, but we have since fixed that so that whenever you do the multiple address, it does now copy over into revision. If you're unsure about this section or if you have a question about multiple site locations, please contact us and we can walk you through this section. Again, this is only if you have two locations with the same site code. Okay, let's talk about expanded learning time. We do get several questions about this every year. So on the applications, you are required to enter in your school operating hours. This section used to be voluntary, but now it is mandatory. The section right underneath it is only for SFAs that are operating expanded learning time. And this section will be used to determine if snacks could possibly be served before the end of the school day. But as a reminder, in order to qualify for expanded learning, you must operate a minimum of 7 hours of instruction time in order to qualify. And please note that expanded learning time also now copies to revisions. This was a problem just like with multi-site locations. If you're not sure about expanded learning time and if you qualify, there's some memos back from 2022 and 2023 that give more in detail about how to qualify for expanded learning. But just make sure that your operating hours and that the instructional minutes for the school day has to be 7 hours of instructional minutes. And that doesn't include lunch period, recess, time in between classes, things like that. Another feature that we added this year under that special circumstances section, if a school has a child daycare or areas RCCI, they can select that appropriate type and select the age range. But under the accredited school type, um, this that information is populated from the lead system, so you can't edit that information that some of the grade ranges. However, we have seen where it's not necessarily correct on the CNP system, especially with newer schools. So you can now update the grade level in the CNP system by selecting that grade range from the drop-down box. And again, this feature is new, so you only need to use that drop-down box if for some reason that grade range that's populating from leads is not correct. Or we have seen too where it's missing. So make sure if there's no grade range listed that you use that drop down box to select the correct grade levels. Okay, for severe need eligibility part of the Schedule A, this section lists all of your schools and facilities for the School Food Authority with the eligibility based on student lunches served in the second preceding year. So since this is application for the 26-27 school year and it's called the 27 application, it's going to be looking at 25 numbers. So the 24-25 application. The eligibility column has a Y if you're eligible and an N if you're not eligible for severe need. And in the checked and Schedule A column, a green check means that the site was marked on the current Schedule A, meaning 2027, as interested in participating in severe need. So whenever you're doing your meals and selecting your meals, make sure you're choosing severe need if you qualify for severe need. Okay, the next section on the application is about the collection procedures. So collection procedures do roll over from year to year, and SFAs can submit the same procedure used in the previous year if no updates are required, as well as you can also create or edit an existing procedure. The collection procedure form allows you to create multiple points of service collection procedures. It wants you to provide details about those procedures and designate those schools that actually use that procedure. The initial page is a list of all the existing procedures for each meal. So if you do breakfast, lunch, and snack, this list does not contain any procedures until you create them, allowing you to create as many or as few as you need. However, each meal service must be assigned to at least one collection procedure so that for each meal service, so that to each site that is submitted in the Schedule A. So make sure when you're doing your meal service for your sites that you are selecting the correct collection procedure for that site. That procedure has to describe how and where a site counts each reimbursable meal, how they collect funds, if they do collect funds, and the location of the point of service. Also, the number of collection procedures can vary based on the following. So, depending on how many sites you have and the different ways you do things, if you have CEP sites versus non CEP sites, the meal services at each site, you might have a different collection procedure for breakfast, lunch, and snack, or you might have the same collection procedure for all three. Um, Also, it depends on how complex your point of service is, and then whether the site has an alternate meal service option, such as breakfast in the classroom. So we do look for that when you're selecting breakfast in the classroom, grab and go, things like that. We are looking to see that collection procedure for that particular meal option. If you don't have any collection procedures listed, you can add it by clicking on the add button. And then after adding that collection procedure, a pop-up window is going to appear and you're going to answer the questions and then you're going to click save. So here's a chart of some reminders when it comes to collection officials, which is the next section. So your determining official can be more than one person, and this is the person that checks those meal applications for completeness and also assigns and records that status, that whether they're free, reduced, or paying to that application. Your pre-verifying official can be more than one person as well, but it cannot be the determining official. It can be the software system, and this is the official that confirms accuracy of the original free and reduced or paid status on that application that's selected for verification. And then your verifying official can also be more than one person. It can be the determining or the pre-verifying official, but it cannot be all three. And this person completes the annual verification process. And then your hearing official is generally only one person. It cannot be the determining official or the pre-verifying official. It cannot be involved in any way with the approval or verification of application. Most of the time we see this as either like the CEO, CFO, or the superintendent, and this person hears any appeals resulting from the verification process. Okay, so income and expense report, I touched briefly on that a minute ago. So the income and expense report is basically the same, but may look a little different than previous years because we do add and take some things out or hide some things from year to year when it's irrelevant. However, the form consists of the same information. So you have page 1, which is your income and reimbursement. Page 2, we have is kind of split into two, is the AB is expenses for your food use, your labor, and benefits. And then page 2, C, D, and E is your equipment, your direct costs, and your indirect costs. And then page 3 is your net cash resources on June 30th. And then page 4 is your allowable operating balance. And then you have a review page as well. So one thing to know when it comes to income and expenses, the information entered on this one is for the previous program school year. So SFAs are entering income and expenses for school year 25-26. So note this is the only form that you are entering prior year information. The rest of the forms is current year, income and expense is prior year. When you're entering the dollar value into your system report, do not use dollar signs or commas, just enter in the numbers. There are text boxes. Some of those that are grayed out cannot be edited. Those are the fields that have been populated from other forms or those calculations, I should say. And then the computer calculates all values in that total column. If you are unsure when it comes to completing the income and expense report, I always recommend you get with your business office, your accounting department, whoever normally helps you with the finances. Get with those people to help you if you are unsure. Also, you can refer to the Louisiana Accounting and Uniform Governmental Handbook, which we call the LAF, for more information on the income and expense codes that are used in this form. Again, when it comes to income and expenses, please don't let waiting for my books to be closed for you prevent you from submitting your application. Submit what you have. Simply put a comment, books are not closed, and then submit to us. And if we have additional questions or we need to add certain things, we can. We do ask though that if you do submit a partial or incomplete income and expense report, that you go back in and do a revision once your books are closed. And then once you complete all of the forms, you will go to submit forms. So all of the forms you have started will appear on that list when you go to submit forms. If the checkbox next to the form is enabled, then you can submit that form by clicking on the box next to that form. A green check's going to appear. If an error message appears and the box is disabled, meaning you can't click on it, this form is not ready for submission. You will see the message at the bottom that says submission of NSLP form is not permitted at this time. And then the list of the items that need to be completed will appear under that form name. So it'll show you basically what's still missing or what's incomplete. If the form must be completed for each school or school facility, items that remain to be completed will also be listed by the site. So it will specify the site and the form. If you still receive that message, submission of the NSLP form is not permitted at this time, and you have checked all of the boxes for the forms listed, then that means you possibly did not even start a required form. Forms only appear on the list after they have been started, so you must go back and complete all the necessary forms. Once you complete all the necessary forms and the corrections are made, then you should be ready to submit. Please click on all the check boxes next to the forms that need to be submitted, and then click Submit. And then after you submit it, LDOE staff members and nutrition support will review that application for completeness. Your agency will be contacted if there are any changes or any updates or errors that need to be addressed. After the application is completed, once we're able to approve it, you will receive an email, and it's going to be sent to the superintendent and the authorized rep saying that the application has been approved. Please note that the application does go through a three-level process, three-level reviewers, okay? So sometimes it can take up to 2 weeks to process and receive approval. That's why it's important that SFA submit your application by the due date to allow time for staff to process and approve these applications and contact you out throughout the process if there are questions or concerns. And just as a reminder, you cannot submit a claim until the application is approved. If it's in a submitted state, you still cannot submit a claim until your application is actually approved. Okay, let's talk about some memos and resources. Really don't have any memos, but I have a lot of things that came out through you from LDOE. So let's talk about MFP funds to begin with. So the statewide MFP formula allocation for fiscal year 26-27 and the associated guidance is now available on LDOE's website, and I have it linked on this slide. It will take you to the MFP homepage. The USDA does require an annual match of state funds for school lunch program. LDOE is provided a total state match amount by USDA each year that must be divided into individual school system match amounts. A memo explaining the requirements and the schedule for fiscal year 26-27, which has all the required matches for each school system, is available in the MFP library under the USDA required school lunch match section. And I have it linked, the memo linked on this slide. But if you have questions regarding MFP funding, the contact information is on this screen. The LDOE MFP help desk email is on this slide. Okay, we did release with the resource management guidance. We talked about this, I think it was at our AR/PR training. We mentioned that we were going to be releasing this, and then we talked about it again at our new director training. So it has been released. It's called Resource Management in Child Nutrition Programs, Clarification and Allocation of Costs to the Nonprofit School Food Service Account. And I do have it linked on the slide. And it's a comprehensive resource that provides SFAs as well as business offices with the regulatory framework required to ensure cost allowability, prevent double charging, and maintain audit-ready financial records. So it's a lot. It's a fairly long resource. They have multiple sections. So like it has a section on the SFA's role as a steward of the nonprofit school food service account. There's a section on fundamental principles of cost allowability. There's a section on distinguishing direct versus indirect costs, critical principle of consistent treatment of costs, understanding that indirect cost rate agreements, a guide to allowability of common SFA expenditures. There's a section on non-competitive procurement, a section on equipment, a section on adult meals, a section on revenue from non-program foods. And then there's also a section on financial system controls and accountability, as well as key principles for compliant resource management. So overall, it's a very comprehensive resource management resource for you to use. So what do we want you to do? So we want you to review the guidance, download and review the complete 2026 resource management manual with your finance team. We took this manual and we went to USDA with it. They looked at it, they approved it before we released it. So make sure you review the guidance and talk to your finance team. As far as your audit allocation methods, reconcile your direct charging methodologies against your LEA's indirect cost rate agreement to eliminate any double charging risk. So check with your finance team, or if you're getting charged directly and indirectly, try to make sure that we're eliminating those double charging risks. If you need to, establish some SOPs, verify that the written internal controls are in place for your non-program foods revenue assessment, that you have an SOP for equipment tracking and purchasing, any time and attendance study documentation. So if you have questions regarding cost allowability, pre-approvals, procurement, anything like that, you can contact us at the general email address or give us a call. And then for those charter schools or LEAs that have indirect cost rate questions, there's an email I'm sorry, I thought I had put on the slide, but it's in the notes. It'll be in the notes section. There's an email address for fedaudit@la.gov if you have questions regarding indirect cost rates. Okay, I wanted to briefly touch on this. I don't want people to panic, but I do want to mention what is supposedly forthcoming, but we don't have much information on it at this time. But USDA is currently developing a multi-year rulemaking effort to align child nutrition programs with the dietary guidelines for American for 2025 through 2030. So USDA proposed rule, which the title is going to be Child Nutrition Programs Aligning Program Requirements with the 2025-2030 Dietary Guidelines for American. At this point, the proposed rule has been sent to the Office of Management and Budget, which is OMB, for review. And this marks the final stage of federal clearance before the proposal is released for public comment. So here's some key details that we are aware of. The proposed rule is expected to update meal pattern and monitoring requirements across federal child nutrition programs. We don't know what, but we just know they're expected to update meal pattern. OMB review is part of the federal rulemaking process and generally occurs before a proposed rule is released for public review and comment. Review timelines may vary, but OMB consideration often provides an indication that publication of that proposed rule is forthcoming. The comment period following that publication is the formal opportunity to tell USDA what these requirements would mean for SFAs and the impact. So feedback submitted during that stage becomes part of the official record USDA must consider before issuing a final rule. And then once the rule is final, that window to influence is then closed. Once this proposed rule is released, LDOE, obviously we will share with SFAs, and at that point would be the opportunity for people who want to submit public comments to USDA can. But again, right now, all we know is that a proposed rule is coming. So I don't want anyone to panic. Remember, we have a proposed rule, then they have a comment section, and then based off of that, they determines the final rule. So we're a little ways out before a final rule, but just be aware that something is coming. Team nutrition materials are available. So Team Nutrition encourages schools, summer meal sites, and childcare organizations to place orders for print materials by August 14th to ensure that they're stocked and ready for a successful start to the school year. Please note that several print materials will be retired after August 17th, so it's uncertain which items will remain available for printing going forward. So if you are looking for Team Nutrition, please go to Team Nutrition website. I have a link on this slide to how you can order those Team Nutrition printed materials. If you can't find an item on the order, it may be temporarily out of stock, but you can always check back for availability. And if you need to inquire about bulk orders, you can always email Team Nutrition at the email that I have on this slide. Okay, let's talk about some upcoming trainings and events. So today is the monthly call for August. And then on August 11th, we're going to have our annual claims for reimbursement training. Then on September 1st will be our monthly call for September. And then on September 15th will be the verification process, at least part one of the verification process. I haven't checked. They may or may not be on Louisiana Fit Kids, the September ones yet, but if they're not up there, they will be up there soon for you to register. So go to Louisiana Fit Kids to register for any upcoming trainings. For those of you, we do have a lot of staff in the field this week and some even into next week. And actually, we had some last week as well doing back to school trainings. We had a lot of requests this year. For those of you that were unable or we were unable to accommodate, or if you're just choosing to do it on your own, we have the following recorded trainings and slides posted to Louisiana Fit Kids. You can use these trainings at your back to schools. We have civil rights. We have offer versus serve, and we have a production records training that you are welcome to use for your back to school trainings. They are recorded, so if you just want to play it live for your staff, you can do that as well. And then Louisiana Festival of Flavors, that Team Nutrition has an upcoming one-day culinary training entitled Fundamentals of Weight and Measures for School Nutrition Professionals. Excuse me. This training will take place on Monday, September 24th 21st, I'm sorry, September 21st at Pineville High School cafeteria from 8 to 3. So we do know this is a Monday, but it's our understanding that there are several. This is like a professional development day for a lot of school systems in that area, at least. Participants will apply the principles of weights and measures to enhance the quality and consistency of school meals, meet USDA meal pattern requirements, ensure nutrient crediting, and maintain recipe consistency. The training is going to include hands-on activities using a teach-it-forward curriculum. So if you are interested, you can register on Louisiana Fit Kids, or Kathy has included a QR code on the slide. You can also email Kathy Carmichael with her email address on this slide with any questions you may have regarding this training. Also, we are continuing on, or I should say Pennington is continuing on with Louisiana Tray of the Week that will take place from August 17th of 2026 to May 14th of 2027 for school year 26-27. So it's a year-long initiative, and each week, Louisiana Fit Kids team will highlight at least one school meal tray that's been served in the past 1 to 4 weeks. You can email your tray photos just like you did last year to louisianafitkids@pbrc.edu. And when you're submitting your meal tray photos, you want to make sure that the meal is meeting the school breakfast or lunch meal pattern, clearly showing all the components. You need to include a short description of the menu items. You need to indicate the school where the meal was served, provide the date of service. Your food should be attractively plated on that tray, and then the tray should be an accurate representation of what your students selected or what they could select. So those of you that participated in last year, you're willing to participate again this year, and we want more people to participate, people who haven't participated before, to submit their meal tray photos. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention again the changes that have been happening here at the Division of Nutrition Support for those that may have not been able to log on to the monthly call. So first, the CNP website, we talked about this over a year ago, and now it has finally happened. That old resource library is no longer, but you don't need to worry. All the information has been moved to the new website, and I have it linked on this slide. So if you don't have this page bookmarked yet, make sure you go ahead and bookmark it. But if you're accustomed going to the old resource library section of the website and you go to that page out of habit, you're automatically redirected to that new child nutrition programs resource library. On the home page is where you click on either resources or memos at the bottom, whichever one you're looking for, to get to the necessary memos and resources to get to that resource library. One thing, we've talked about this before too, to note about this new, what we're calling new resource library, is the improved searchability. You can filter by resource type, program, date, tag, or title to refine your search significantly and more readily pinpoint your relevant resources. I personally prefer just typing into the text box and hitting search. Sometimes if you filter too much, it may not find it, or it could be just a dash versus a hyphen or something like that. So I just usually search by one of the words and I can usually find it fairly easily. And as we're finding things are more complicated to find, we are tweaking things a little bit to make it easier for you to find certain items. And then on this screen is just some screenshots that shows the different filters that you can narrow your search down by and find what you're looking for. So you basically select the filter, click the search, and the results are going to be narrowed down for you. And then moving on to the changes with memo, we've talked about this previously as well. You're going to see less and less memos being sent out. Some of the reason basically is because some of that information does not necessarily require an official memo and may be sent out through an email blast. So we started doing some email blasts, but we're waiting for our new email blast system to be up and running. So like, direct match files, things like that, you're going to start seeing more of an email blast. You'll begin to also notice changing to the formatting and the styles of memos. This is taking us a little while for updating the styles on a lot of our forms and memos. And then for forms and resources, again, like with the memos, you're going to start seeing that changes in the styles and the format. We are working on a lot of different forms, updating it to the LDOE official logo. So you may see some forms currently on the website that have older and then some of them that are newer. So as we post something new, we just update it and get rid of the old one, put the new one on there. So please note, I mean, this is a work in progress, so it may take us some time, but like we just talked about 3 forms today, the equipment form, the CNP agreement amendment, and non-competitive procurement request forms are all that have been recently updated because those are used quite often. Okay, and with that, I will check to see if we have questions in the chat. Okay. I'm being told that the September trainings are posted on Louisiana FitKids, so you can go ahead. And then Kathy Carmichael has added how to register for the upcoming training and to see, and actually where you can upload your photos. Oh, actually, it's last year's photos gallery. Okay, I'm not seeing any more chats at the moment. So we do have a question about the adult meals. So again, the minimum charge what USDA is telling us is what's listed on the Schedule A for meal pricing. If you choose to charge less, you're going to have to show a justification that you either are your average meal cost is less, and that's why you're charging that. But again, you don't report the average meal cost on the application. You have to show justification. If it's less than that, then you have to be able to show that either you justifying as why by having a lower average meal cost to produce that meal, or that the Child Nutrition Fund is not paying for the difference, that general fund is supplementing your program to pay for those adult meals that you're giving at a lower or giving a discounted price too. We do have a question of where the old calls can be found. Everything is on the House on Louisiana Fit Kids under trainings. Okay, I am not seeing any more questions in the chat. So again, if you do have any additional questions or you need a one-on-one conversation, please email us at childnutritionprograms@la.gov or give us a call at 225-342-9661. And that will end today's call. Thank you for attending and good luck with the start of the new school year.